This is Dr. John Bardo. He's president of Wichita State, where he is leading the school to new places with Innovation Campus and maybe even WSU football. The guy sitting across from him is Jeff Fluhr. He's president of the newly formed Greater Wichita Partnership, where he focuses on growing Wichita's core economy through downtown development and entrepreneurship. This is their conversation about Wichita.
Well, Jeff, thanks for coming out to the university.
Oh, John, it's always a pleasure to come out. I appreciate you the invitation.
So, how's your family? How
they are
things with you?
doing really well.
Good.
Matthew just turned 13. Anna Joy just turned 7. But how about your
Good.
family? How's everyone
Oh,
doing?
doing well. Deborah's getting out and about around the campus a lot, and our son just took off to North Carolina for a temporary job. Yeah, he's riding a motorcycle over. I'm not sure I'm thrilled about that, but the part of North Carolina he's in is going to be in the mountains.
Oh, that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, so they'll take off.
You know, as I was driving to the campus, you know, you've got these great epicenters
Right.
of activity. Now the fun part, I believe, is how you knit all this together. That to me is where we are right now.
No, I think so too, and I think there's going to be some interesting discussions, no doubt. There's some areas of town that I think could really be pretty major players that we've not done a lot with yet, but they're evolving on their own. I've not heard any conversation in the community about College Hill, for example.
Right. You know, I mean, simple things of, we even talked about the queue line. Instead of doing the loop around the core, you put it on an axis where it's going up and down Douglas. It starts to tie into College Hill, tie over into the Delano district. It's building a streetcar without building the streetcar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't have to have all that.
Exactly. I mean, it's a building block, if you will, of connecting those areas.
The way, from my field, the way these things tend to work is that natural market forces cause things to happen, and then you try to magnify the natural market forces. And Delano is happening not because any of us thought it was a good idea, but because it's happening.
Right.
Now, what can we do as a community to help magnify those natural market forces that are causing Delano to be such a good area?
I often try, because I tend to really, people know that I like to talk quite a bit.
I can't imagine. Neither of us do that.
And you, always, hello, how are
there.
you? Well, this is
right.
fantastic, thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But I've had, you know, people say, well, if you can boil it down into clear, concise messages, what is it? You know, and the thing that I see happening in Wichita are deliberate strategies for deliberate outcomes.
Right.
Or intended outcomes.
Right. One of the things that we haven't done very well, I think, as a community, is explain the quality of life factors. And so there's resistance to investing in certain things that really we do need to invest in because they perceive them as fluffy and not.
Right.
Yet without them, nothing's going to work. So a lot of where I'm worrying now is how do we get that conversation going? I think we're focusing some questions at the university around football. And the city is pretty much evenly divided on that. Those people who want to go to football want us to do it.
Right.
Those people who think we may ask them to pay for it are saying, well, it's a bad investment. But the fact is, it is probably, we don't know whether it's a good investment yet. We're still studying that. But if we choose to make that investment, it would be because of a community impact as well as a university impact.
Well, and that's, you know, when we looked at Wichita, I mean, the quality of life that we saw back in '08, you know, with the art throughout the city. The fact that you go into our suburban areas and you have brick crosswalks.
Yes.
And you have the great collection of the museums that a city our size should not probably be able to have, but yet there's been a commitment long term. And you're right, I think that's the thing where I think a lot of times people will see progress and say, we've done enough, it will run itself.
Right.
It's not the case.
It doesn't work that way. This is continuing public-private investment.
Right.
It's never going to be gone. It's never going to be done. And the fact is that this is a competitive market. And while we can say, if we look only locally, we've done a lot, which we have. When you go look at other cities, they're doing that and more.
Right.
And I'm not talking about going to New York City or Boston where you've got a different population base, but when you look at places like Omaha, Des Moines, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, places that are very much our peers, they are also making investments. And so this is always going to be a moving target.
One of the things I love about the millennials is that there's an impatience that's there.
Right.
And I think, you know, sometimes you're like, wait a minute, we got to do a due process on some things, but yet, I think with some of the things we're talking about, that impatience is fantastic because that can be the catalyst to make sure we stay very pointed and focused.
It really can, and it pushes us to do the things we should be doing.
Yeah.
And as we are used to making investments and get a little skittish sometimes about the possibility of loss, they aren't there yet. And that's actually probably pretty useful because the realities are that we're going to be trying some things that won't work. We all know that.
Well, and you know, if you don't have some failures along the way, you're not trying.
Exactly.
You don't need to become risk averse.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's when you look at some of these other communities. They're trying things. Some things work well. They'll take some of that stuff and then turn it and massage it, move it forward. Getting people's perspectives about our community is really, I think, important. And one of the things that we're working on right now with the partnership is the engagement with site selectors. They are selling our community, whether we know it or not. One of the things we want to do is leverage by bringing site selectors in, let them see our community. And it was really interesting. We did that a few weeks ago, as you know, and we worked with a group out of Chicago and out of Fort Worth. And their perspective of our community was outstanding. They see what's happening here at the campus, what's happening at Newman, what's happening at Friends, and the other universities, WATC, and Wichita's Promise, and what's happening with downtown development. And they started thinking about Wichita in the light of how companies they are representing fit into that.
Absolutely.
And how they bring assets that would contribute to that whole. Well, through your lens, how do you think things are rolling with entrepreneurship? There's a lot of efforts with ETF. There's a lot of efforts with the Incubator Accelerator. It's opening up, this week at the High Touch building, and you have companies like S&T. You have incredible things happening with NIAR. And so, what's some of your thoughts on how
I think it's
rolling?
getting better. There's a number of issues I think that we still have on the table, and again, that's part of my training is to say, okay, well, let's poke at the things that aren't there yet.
Yeah.
I really don't think we're using the federal SBI RSTTR programs the way we could. We have not yet thought through as a university how we incubate the right kinds of things on our campus. We're doing NIAR, that's right, but there's a lot of others that ought to be here. There are others that ought to be downtown. A lot of, I think, the next steps for us as a metro area is not just to say, hey, look, we're going to do entrepreneurship and we're doing these things, but then again to segment. What is it we should be doing in the downtown incubator? What is it might be that we don't even need a particular incubator, but we need connections and ways of people coming together, and then what should be done on the campus, because otherwise it won't work.
Right.
We're ready for that step. We're 3 years ago, we weren't even able to talk about that stuff.
I mean, that's what's been, I think, really amazing in Wichita is the acceleration.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That's happened over the last 5 years, 3 years, to where we are really now to take some of those, again, those strategic, deliberate steps that, that will lead to the next thing.
Generally speaking, if you're not an early adopter, then you can learn from the mistakes of others, which can accelerate your capacity to move. Sure. So you may be able to move in a year or two, what took them 7 or 8 years to accomplish. So, and I'm seeing that here at the university, where having had a chance to study the innovation kind of campuses that were created around the United States, we didn't make the same mistakes they did. Now we'll make our own, and goodness knows we will. But we didn't make theirs, and so we've been able to move in 2.5 years what it took North Carolina State over 5 years to do, and took the Research Triangle Park almost 20 years to do.
Very good point.
Now, someone will come in after us and go, wow, they messed that up. We won't do that one. But that's okay. I mean, that's the way these things work. But that's actually, I think, while it's harmful in the short run, in the long run, it may actually allow us to move more quickly.
And you're right. I mean, the things that we're doing with the partnership, I mean, we've been looking at the Allegheny Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they've been in existence for decades.
Sure.
Very much a regional approach, to what they're doing. And then you look at the Des Moines partnership.
You bet.
And to your point, I mean, really analyzing, okay, what has worked well, what hasn't. So how does that help have our common north, if you will, as we go forward, so that each step is one that maximizes the opportunities we have today, but also cultivates new ones as we're going forward.
Yeah, our basic rule of thumb ought to be make our own mistakes, don't repeat theirs.
There you go.
And let others learn from ours. So.
Just out of curiosity, looking at the campus, I mean, you're already seeing great progress. Where do you want it to be in 2 years? What are some of the things that you think, and how do we help with that? Because I think that's important.
Jeff, I think the really big issues for us, we talk about this great change that has happened with globalization and technology, higher ed has been really slow to respond to that. Because of the uniqueness of Wichita State's history and culture, we're actually better able to respond than most other universities that are not land grants. So what I'm looking at is how do we think about the university in terms of the role it can play in core education. We always are going to do that. But how do we move it to magnify the capacities of the region, recognizing that this region's 26% of the state's economy. So while we're a state entity, if we can grow that 26%, we can impact the whole state. We don't have to physically be everywhere. We can be in our 9-county region and have giant statewide impact. So what we're looking at is, as a university, is how do we take what we're doing and create our innovation campus as a core of an innovation district that becomes a midtown innovation district, which is typically what is happening around the United States down in cities of our size.
We haven't told our story as well as we could, and I think that's a different, I think that's part of that as we go forward, all these opportunities that we've been talking about this morning, about here's opportunities.
No question.
But we all have to be pulling in the same direction, going back to policy.
You have to.
And if you measure it always back to what's the market opportunity,
Exactly.
if you do this, is I think a powerful dynamic.
It's getting near the end. I think I've got another meeting. I expect you do. And,
Yes, sir.
We probably ought to run off to our respective meetings. It's great to have a chance to have breakfast with you.
Well,
And
I appreciate
to talk.
the invitation. Soccer Hall has fantastic food.
Yeah, it really is good, isn't it? I know.
It's very good.
Yeah, it ended up getting cold from just talking, but what I had was really wonderful. So.
No, well, it's a pleasure to work with you, sir.
It's great to work with you,
And
too.
I think that, again, however we can come alongside the campus and continue to help in any way, we want to do that. I know you feel the same with
Absolutely.
with
the whole rest of the
downtown, but
metro
everything
area.
else.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's going to be quite interesting to see the story as it unfolds the next couple of years. I think it's going to be very dynamic.
No question.
And I think people are going to take a new note of what Wichita has to offer.